Hi, my name is Sue Jeffers. Welcome to our continuing series on introducing you to candidates who are running for office in the great state of Minnesota. Today, joining me, Dave Thompson is running for Minnesota Senate in Senate District 36, which you're going to have to help me out, Dave. Where is Senate District 36?
Good to see you, Sue.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Senate District 36 is southern Twin Cities. It stretches from Lakeville, where I live, over east into Farmington, and then it kind of dips down south on the east side through a lot of the townships and actually picks up about the northernmost precinct in Northfield. So southern Twin Cities and down to just about into Northfield.
Well, I'll tell you, the Minnesota Senate is one of my greatest sources of frustration ever. You realize Republicans haven't controlled the Senate in, 35 years?
It's been a while.
And we're going to change that. Come November 2010, we're going to change that, and we're going to help get politicians like you elected.
Well, I'll tell you what, the thing of it is, it would be wonderful to be in the majority. Even if we're not, though, the point is we can't give it up, not fight, not articulate our principles. The fact is we're on the winning side of these arguments. Republicans, conservatives like myself who believe in free markets, individual liberty, people running the economy rather than the government, we are on the right side of these issues. And one of the reasons that I'm doing this, Sue, is I'm not afraid to debate anybody. As many people know, I've spent years doing it just like you have, and I'm prepared to stand up and make the arguments and try to win over the hearts and minds of people so that if we don't get in the majority this time, we certainly do next time.
And we should tell everyone, not only have you had a fantastic career as an attorney, but you've also had a fantastic career on many years on radio and on TV. And you aren't afraid to debate anybody. That's the beauty of it.
No, I'm not. And I am so convinced of the fact that we conservatives are on the correct side of these arguments, as is being proven by the absurdity that we're seeing in Washington. By the way, I said conservatives. We unfortunately have had a lot of people who are wearing the Republican label that are supporting the kinds of spending, the levels of spending that have kind of launched us into the problems that we've got now. And then obviously it's all been put, on the fast track under the Obama administration, under Democratic leadership here in the legislature in Minnesota, and we've got to stop it. It's not a situation where, well, it might be a little bit worse if we do this. We are running ourselves nationally into a serious problem, literally being an insolvent country, and statewide we're losing employers, we're losing jobs, we're overburdening employers, and it drives me insane, Sue, to watch people talk about having good jobs out of this side of their mouth, and then out of this side of their mouth talking about regulating and taxing businesses. Those two things don't go together.
Do not go together. So let's talk about the state of Minnesota. We have a huge budget deficit. Minnesota's lucky because we have to have a balanced budget. But the way they balance that budget, I'll tell you, Dave Thompson, it drives people like me and you, I'm sure, crazy.
Well, a couple of things we've got to do. First off, we've got to try to be realistic about forecasting our revenues. And
they're wrong every time.
They're wrong every time, and they rarely err on the side that they forecast it lower than the revenues actually are. It's always the other way around. So we need to be realistic about our forecasting. But here's the other thing. The transportation, education, and social services in the Minnesota state budget comprise about 79% of the budget. So if you're going to make serious inroads into decreasing the size of government, you cannot take those off the table. So along with being realistic about our revenues, we have to be willing to cut costs everywhere.
Everywhere.
That doesn't mean we cut costs everywhere. That means we leave everything on the table. And because I always say to folks, if you're going to throw out the 3 or 4 or 5 largest components you spend money on and then try to cut your state budget, that would be like you and your household not being willing to adjust your mortgage payment, your car payment, your food budget, your insurance budget, but think you're going to cut your household budget. You can't do it. It doesn't make sense. And so what these politicians do that drive me crazy, and it happens both in Washington and in Minnesota, is, oh, well, we cut these things whatever percent. It doesn't matter. But of course not entitlements. Well, then we define entitlements as 80% of the budget. So as a practical matter, we're not getting any big numbers at all. And we've got to stop that mentality. Everything has to be looked at, period. We're at that point.
Mm-hmm. We are at that point. Everything has to be on the table. Okay, so let's talk about continuing along the budget theme, local government aid. I call it welfare for cities. What do you think we should do with local government aid?
Well, in an ideal world, we'd get rid of it. Now, realistically, Sue, we would have to phase it out.
Right.
Because we have so many, just like we've made recipients of social welfare dependent on the social welfare programs, we've made towns and cities dependent on the LGA system. And there are some cities in northern Minnesota where nearly 50 cents, or about 33 cents on the dollar, about 1/3 of their budget in some cities is LGA. You can't cut them off cold turkey, or they literally couldn't get their streets plowed. What we need to do is phase it out and get rid of it. But you're exactly right. It is simply a wealth redistribution scheme. It is taking from those cities that are prosperous and doing well and giving it to the cities and towns that aren't. And it's not right.
And I think people don't understand that initially local government aid, like most government programs, started out with a good intention. It started out to help smaller cities with things that they couldn't afford, whether it was their police force or a wastewater treatment plant or something like that. And now you're seeing St. Cloud, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth seeing enormous chunks of local government aid funding. Why do they deserve it? And the city that I live in, New Brighton, or maybe one of the cities in your district, they get nothing.
No, well, they don't deserve it, and they shouldn't have it for the kinds of things that it's being spent for. Now, I have rural roots. I'm from northwestern Minnesota, smaller town, East Grand Forks. My wife was raised on a farm about 18 miles north of East Grand Forks, very familiar with the small towns, and I have a soft spot in my heart for it. I mean, these are great people. They're productive people by and large. And so, yes, you're right, the intent of it was reasonable. The problem is that it ends up becoming just another money grab, and we don't have any more money to grab.
We need to cut the spending. Why is it nobody will talk about the spending?
Well, I think people won't talk about spending because it doesn't necessarily help you get reelected. But I'm here to tell you, as much as I am excited about the prospect of doing this job, if I am honored by winning on November 2nd, I do not need to get reelected to salvage my self-esteem. I will do the right thing, and I will let the chips fall where they may. And what I find, Sue, of course there are ideologues on the other side that are going to dislike my positions and what I do no matter what. And then there are a lot of people who are in agreement with me. A lot of those people, I think, in the middle, the quote-unquote moderates, or people who maybe aren't as ideologically driven, I think they really value integrity, and they value people of principle. And I will vote what I believe. And you know, the beauty of it is, for my constituency, I talked about what I believed on a 50,000 watt radio station for about 7.5 years. Pretty much people know what I believe if they pay attention at all. And I'm prepared to back it up with my finger on the button in St. Paul.
I harp about the spending, but now they're trying to borrow their way into prosperity. What do you think about a $1 billion bonding bill?
Well, I don't like the size of it. Now, bonding is not an illegitimate exercise.
Right.
Bonding is for capital improvements, and it makes sense because essentially it is having future generations participate in paying for things that will benefit people into the future. So obviously a school building, those kinds of things. My children and my grandchildren benefit from roads, schools, those kinds of things. So bonding is a legitimate exercise. However, it should be bonding for things that we need. It should be limited to capital projects. And most importantly, see, I don't think bonding would be an issue if we kept government in its proper role, and that is providing public services, not recreational services, not baseball or football stadiums, not golf courses, and I'm an avid golfer, okay? Not doing those kinds of things. If we weren't doing those things, then the bonding bills wouldn't get so bloated year after year, I should say biennium after biennium.
And it's funny because it used to be you'd have a bonding bill every other year, but I know we've had $1 billion bonding bills the last 3 years.
Yeah, it's